Following the fall of the imperial world of Cadia during the events of the 13th Black Crusade, a series of massive and interconnecting warp rifts would emerge, spanning from one corner of the galaxy to the other. This great wound within the fabric of reality is known by many names. The Tau Empire refers to this rift as the Devourer of Hope, while the Orcs call it Gork's Grin. To the Imperium, it is known as the Cicatrix Maledictum. The exact event that resulted in the creation of the Cicatrix Maledictum is not entirely clear, with many differing and often radical hypotheses. Some claim that the rift's creation was due to the Cadian pylons being destroyed. Others theorize that it was due to the gestation of Iniad, the Eldari god of the dead, while others still state that it was due to the Chaos gods lashing out in rage against the material universe following the resurrection of the Ultramarines Primarch, Rabute Guilliman. As the Cicatrix Maledictum spread across the fabric of reality, the galaxy and by extent the Imperium of Man would be split in two. The segment of the galaxy located to the galactic east of the rift would become known to the Imperium as Imperium Nihilus, or the Dark Imperium. The Dark Imperium is so named due to the light of the Astronomican, which is used by Imperial navigators to safely plot a course through the warp, being obscured to the worlds east of the Cicatrix Maledictum. This in turn makes warp travel incredibly dangerous and unstable throughout Imperium Nihilus. When the rift came into existence, the light of the Astronomican vanished throughout not just Imperium Nihilus but the entirety of the Imperium for a period of several weeks, resulting in madness, riots, and even demonic incursion as cults in service to the Dark Gods made their move. This time of darkness would be known as the Noctis Aeterna. Yet during the Noctis Aeterna, a small and seemingly insignificant hive world, known as Tsadrekha, was able to produce a beacon of light within the darkness, in a similar manner to the device known as the Pharos beacon, which was discovered during the time of the Horus Heresy. It was thanks to this beacon that Tsadrekha was able to communicate with the rest of the Imperium, and in turn request and receive aid against numerous chaotic incursions. Unlike the Pharos beacon, however, this beacon was not generated as a result of a miraculous piece of ancient Xenos technology, but was instead conjured from the mind of an individual known simply as Caleb. Caleb was originally a young soldier of the Astra Militarum, who unlocked his new powers upon the killing fields of Dessa, when his body became enveloped by blinding golden light, a light that burnt so strongly that it seared his eyes from their sockets and burned away his nerves. While his regiment's Medicae officers and the accompanying ecclesiarchal priests initially thought this light to be the result of a new weapon devised by their enemy or due to potential spiritual corruption, they would in fact declare that this light was a miracle, the purifying flame of the Emperor himself, for as the light spread, it banished demonic entities back into the warp. Caleb would be declared as a saint, a prophet, and even as an angel by the other members of his regiment, before he would be placed into the care and custody of the Adepta Sororitas of the Order of the Crimson Tear within their convent upon Tsadrekha. However, Caleb's power came at a cost, for they would only manifest while he remained awake. Thus, Caleb was placed within a life support cradle that kept him conscious and alive, though at the slow cost of his sanity. When the World Eater's Traitor Legion launched an all-out assault upon Tsadrekha, a small cell of warriors from the Alpha Legion would also make planetfall, and would eventually locate and kidnap Caleb, making their way off-world with the beacon of Tsadrekha. So just what exactly caused Caleb to manifest such a seemingly miraculous ability? One possibility is that Caleb was a Latent Psychic, a being whose own psychic abilities become apparent later on in their lives, as opposed to manifesting while they are still fairly young, as documented with most psykers. This would initially appear to be the most likely reason behind Caleb's sudden and unexpected demonstration of psychic power. Given that Caleb was able to, in effect, create a miniature version of the Astronomican, with the true Astronomican needing to be powered by a choir of over 10,000 psykers, this would make Caleb an almost absurdly powerful individual when compared to other psychically sensitive beings. Psykers are created within the Imperium according to what is known as the assignment. Most humans are classified as being either Rho or Pi class, beings who demonstrate no level of psychic activity. Most psykers that appear within the forces of the Imperium, as either sanctioned psykers or inquisitors, tend to be categorized anywhere between Iota, Theta, and Eta class, depending upon their own psychic potency. With Caleb's own immense power, this could possibly mean that Caleb could be classified anywhere from being a Delta class psyker at least, or potentially even an Alpha or Alpha Plus class psyker, with the latter of which not only being exceedingly rare, but the majority of the Imperium's Medicae Imperialis believe that the human body is physically incapable of containing such potent psychic energies. As stated earlier, when Caleb's abilities first began to materialize, his body would indeed begin manifesting signs of physical trauma, as demonstrated with both his eyes and nervous system, and thus such signs of the body seemingly being unable to physically contain such immense psychic power would initially support the notion that Caleb was indeed a latent psyker who would be classified anywhere between Delta to an Alpha Plus class psyker. Another possibility that could explain Caleb's suddenly acquired and extremely potent powers could be due to Caleb having become, for lack of a better term, possessed. Perhaps Caleb had become possessed by the powers of the Emperor himself for a brief moment of time. This wouldn't be entirely unprecedented, as within the novel Plague War, there was a teenage girl named Kalia who had become a conduit for the Emperor's own godlike power, and her presence would prove instrumental in aiding Imperial forces drive back the Death Guard Traitor Legion, decimating the Traitor Legion's demonic allies with a purifying holy light. Despite this possibility, it is admittedly unlikely. The reasoning for this is due to the fact that this intense power that manifested within Kalia would eventually inflict far too much damage for her fragile physical form, and the power that flowed through her would ultimately kill her. Instead of being a receptacle for the Emperor's power, Caleb could have become the physical vessel for some type of benevolent warp-spawned entity, similar to a living saint. While many living saints, such as Saint Celestine, will appear as distinct corporeal beings whenever they make their presence known, there have been examples of these beings channeling their essence into a mortal host in order to anchor themselves within real space. One example of this occurring is demonstrated within the novel Sabbat Martyr, where the essence of Saint Sabbat would choose the woman known as Sanian to act as her physical vessel following the death of her reincarnated form. Sanian, now Sabbat, would become bathed in golden light and would be revealed to be clad in golden armor, bearing a long silver blade, and her cloak would transform into a large and elegant pair of wings. While most living saints that have been documented are female, there have been some rare male examples, such as with Saint Lozapath. As such, it's reasonable to assume that Caleb had become possessed by the spirit of a living saint who had been recently slain during the events following in the aftermath of the 13th Black Crusade. What makes the likelihood of Caleb being possessed by the essence of a living saint somewhat unfeasible, however, is that Caleb failed to manifest the traits that are commonly displayed by living saints, such as the golden armor or wings that are seen with Saint Celestine, Saint Sabbat, and even Saint Anay. Despite this, it is still possible that Caleb had become the host of a different warp entity entirely. Given that Caleb's powers had taken the form of what is effectively a miniature Astronomican, then perhaps Caleb had become the host of the entity known as Imperius, the avatar of the Astronomican. Imperius, also known as the Solar Priest, was a warp entity that first made his presence known centuries after the events of the Horus Heresy, and was described as being another facet of the Astronomican's power, a manifestation of the Emperor's godlike psychic might. The first and so far only documented account of his appearance would be made upon the Tlaloc, the ship of the Thousand Sun sorcerer Iskandar Kaon. As detailed within the novel Talon of Horus, Imperius would request that Kaon and his allies abandon their mission of locating the Sons of Horus flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, attempting to appeal to the Astartes' humanity in this regard. However, Kaon would ignore the Solar Priest's warnings and destroy the physical form of Imperius, the entity's withered and cadaverous body eventually breaking apart before collapsing into dust. Since Imperius was a warp-spawned entity, it's unlikely that Imperius was completely destroyed, and as such, it's entirely feasible to assume that Imperius could have returned from the depths of the warp at some future point in time. Whenever demons are banished back into the warp from the material realm, they are able to return and manifest themselves within real space again, providing that their essence hasn't been completely destroyed. Some even claim that a demon banished from the material realm cannot return for at least 100 years and a day, although the veracity of this specific time frame is debatable at best. But given the fact that demons are always able to return from the warp, then it is entirely possible that after Imperius had his corporeal form destroyed by Iskandar Kaon, the avatar of the Astronomican could have spent centuries, if not millennia, reconstituting his essence within the warp. Perhaps when the Astronomican was briefly snuffed out, following the fall of Cadia, Imperius sought to possess the body of a suitable mortal host in order to briefly produce a secondary Astronomican until the Noctis Aeterna subsided, allowing the true Astronomican to burn brightly once more. This certainly seems a distinct possibility, as the light that Caleb began to emit would burn and banish demons back into the warp, very much like the fire tide that is produced by the Astronomican within the depths of ice-space, bathing the radiant worlds in purifying flame and causing untold pain and suffering to demonic entities. Regardless of the exact cause of Caleb's powers, one can only imagine what his Alpha Legion captors have in store for him in the future. What do you think? Leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.